My name is Amara Davis, and for 4 years, I worked at the Golden Oak Steakhouse. 4 years of serving prime cuts to businessmen who never looked me in the eye. 4 years of dodging hands that reached for my waist when I leaned over to pour wine. 4 years of hearing comments about my body whispered just loud enough for me to catch. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the night of October 14th. The night a bachelor party walked in with scorecards. Actual scorecards. They rated every server in the restaurant on a scale of 1 to 10. They held them up like Olympic judges whenever we passed their table. And when I reported it to my manager, a man I had trusted for 4 years, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Boys will be boys. They're dropping $2,000 tonight. Just smile through it." I didn't smile. I recorded. And 8 months later, when the judge read the verdict, those boys learned something their money couldn't buy them out of. Men will pay. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what happened that night was just the beginning. What I discovered in the weeks that followed made me realize this wasn't about one bachelor party. This wasn't about one night. This was about a system, a pattern, a culture that had been rotting inside the Golden Oak for years. And I was about to tear the whole thing down, one recording at a time. Before I tell you what happened, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know where this story is reaching. And while you're there, tell me this. Have you ever been rated, judged, or objectified at your job? Have you ever had a manager tell you to just deal with it? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone in the service industry, someone who's been told to just smile through harassment, send them this video. They need to know they're not alone. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The Golden Oak Steakhouse sat on the corner of Madison and Fifth, right in the heart of the downtown business district. It was the kind of place where a single steak cost more than my electricity bill. Dark wood paneling, leather booths, candles flickering on every table. The clientele were mostly men in suits, executives closing deals, lawyers celebrating settlements, finance guys throwing money around like confetti. I'd been working there since I was 23, fresh out of community college, desperate for steady income. The tips were good. The hours were brutal. The customers were a mixed bag. Some were gentlemen. Others were something else entirely. My manager was a man named Richard Hartley. Everyone called him Rick. He'd been running the Golden Oak for 11 years, and he had this way of making you feel like you were part of something special. "This isn't just a restaurant," he used to say during staff meetings. "This is an experience. We're selling luxury, and luxury means the customer is always right." I believed him at first. I believed that the occasional uncomfortable comment was just part of the job. I believed that the wandering hands were accidents. I believed that if I was professional enough, polite enough, invisible enough, I could navigate this world without getting hurt. I was wrong. The first time I really understood what the Golden Oak was, I had been working there for about 6 months. A regular customer, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a gold watch, grabbed my wrist as I was setting down his martini. He squeezed hard enough to leave a mark. "You're my favorite," he said, his breath hot with alcohol. "Don't tell the others." I pulled away, my heart pounding. I went straight to Rick. I showed him the red marks on my wrist. I told him exactly what happened. And Rick? He sighed like I had just told him the copier was jammed. "That's Mr. Henderson," he said. "He's been coming here for 15 years. He doesn't mean anything by it. He's just old-fashioned." Old-fashioned. That was the word Rick used for men who grabbed, for men who commented, for men who made us feel like objects on a menu they could order whenever they pleased. Old-fashioned. I went home that night and cried in the shower. Not because of what Mr. Henderson did, because of what Rick didn't do. But I needed the job. So I stayed. I learned to dodge. I learned to smile through the discomfort. I learned to turn my body sideways when certain customers reached. I perfected the art of being present but untouchable. For 4 years, I survived. But that night in October, something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like ice before a flood. The bachelor party arrived at 7:45 on a Saturday night. The air outside was crisp with autumn, leaves scattered across the sidewalk like forgotten promises. Inside, the Golden Oak hummed with its usual Saturday energy. Candles flickered, wine glasses clinked, soft jazz played through hidden speakers. Then the front door burst open. 8 men, all in their early 30s, loud and already drunk before they even sat down. The groom was a guy named Chad Worthington. I remember his name because he made sure everyone in the restaurant knew it. "Bachelor party for Chad," he announced when they walked in, arms spread wide like he was addressing his loyal subjects. His friends cheered loudly. Customers looked up, annoyed, then returned to their meals. Rick was at the host stand. He saw them, sized them up, and his eyes actually lit up. He knew what a group like that meant. Big orders, big tips, big night. He seated them in the back corner booth, the biggest one we had, the one that curved around like a horseshoe. Then he came to me. "Amara, I want you on table 12 tonight." I looked at the bachelor party. They were already taking shots, shouting, slapping each other, on the back. Everything in me said no. "Rick, can someone else take it? They look like trouble." He put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, possessive. His breath smelled like coffee and something sour. "They're here to spend money, Amara. A lot of it. I need my best server on this. You're my best server." It wasn't a compliment. It was an assignment. It was a sacrifice. I was being offered up to the wolves because I was good at surviving them. So I grabbed my notepad, took a breath that did nothing to calm my racing heart, and walked over to table 12. Each step felt heavier than the last. The moment I approached, they went silent. 8 pairs of eyes moved over me like I was an item on the menu. I felt my skin crawl, but I kept my voice steady. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Amara, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with some drinks?" One of them, a guy with slicked back hair and a smirk that made my stomach turn, leaned forward. "Amara," he repeated, drawing out the syllables like he was tasting them. "Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. What are you? Like a 7? 7.5?" The others laughed. I didn't understand at first. Then I saw it. He was holding a small whiteboard. The kind coaches use in sports. On it, he had written the number 7. Another guy held up his board. 6.5. Another. 7. They were rating me. I felt my face flush. Not with embarrassment, with rage. A rage so pure and hot it surprised me. Years of swallowing my pride, years of being polite, years of dealing with it. All of it bubbled up in that moment like lava finding a crack. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice tight with barely controlled fury. Chad the groom waved his hand dismissively like he was swatting away a fly. "Relax, sweetheart, it's a game. We rate all the servers. It's just for fun. You should be flattered. 7's pretty good." I should be flattered. The words echoed in my skull like a siren. I should be flattered that a group of drunk men were holding up scorecards judging my appearance like I was a figure skater at the Olympics. I took a step back. I need to speak with my manager. I found Rick behind the bar, checking inventory. My hands were shaking. "Rick, table 12 has scorecards. They're rating us. All of us." They held up numbers when I walked over. Rick glanced toward the back booth, then back at me. Scorecards? Yes, like we're being judged in a competition. It's humiliating. He was quiet for a moment. Then he did something I will never forget. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A dismissive one. Amara, come on. It's a bachelor party. They're blowing off steam. They're not hurting anyone. They're objectifying us. All of us. In front of the entire restaurant. They're spending $2,000 tonight minimum. Maybe more. That's your tip. That's everyone's tip. So here's what you're going to do. He leaned in close. His breath smelled like coffee and something sour. You're going to go back to that table. You're going to smile. You're going to give them excellent service. And you're going to let them have their fun. Boys will be boys, Amara. That's the reality of this business. Deal with it. Boys will be boys. Those 4 words hung in the air between us. I stared at him, waiting for him to crack, to tell me he was joking. He didn't. He turned back to his inventory like the conversation was over, and something in my chest shifted. The crack deepened. I walked away from the bar. But I didn't go back to table 12. Not yet. First, I went to the break room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. I sat down on the old couch that smelled like grease and cigarette smoke, and years of servers' tears. The stuffing poked through the worn fabric. Someone had carved initials into the wooden arm. This was where we came to fall apart. Where we came to put ourselves back together. Where we came to pretend everything was fine before returning to the floor with practiced smiles. And I pulled out my phone. I had started carrying a recording app 6 months earlier, after another incident with another customer that Rick had also dismissed. I never thought I would actually use it. But sitting there, my hands still trembling, I opened the app. I pressed record. I tucked the phone into the front pocket of my apron, the microphone facing outward. Then I walked back out onto the floor. Because if Rick wasn't going to document what was happening, I would. The rest of that night was a masterclass in degradation. Every time a server approached table 12, the scorecards went up. Melissa, a college student working weekends, got a 4. She came into the break room crying during her 15-minute break. They said I was barely a 4 because of my acne, she whispered, her voice breaking. Jenny, who had been at the Golden Oak for 7 years, got a 5.5. For an older chick, one of them said loud enough for her to hear. She was 32. I got rated 4 more times that night. The numbers fluctuated depending on how closely I bent over, how tight my uniform looked from certain angles, how much I smiled at their jokes. I smiled at nothing. I kept my face neutral, my movements efficient. I did my job, and I recorded everything. At one point, the guy with the slicked back hair, his name was Derek, I learned later, grabbed my arm as I was clearing plates. Hey, where are you going so fast? We want to look at you some more. You're up to an 8 now. Isn't that great? I pulled my arm away. Please don't touch me. He held up his hands in mock surrender. Whoa, calm down. I'm just being friendly. Friendly. Another word for harassment in this world. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came at the end of the night, when Chad, drunk beyond reason, stood up on the booth seat and addressed the entire table like he was giving a toast. Gentlemen, he slurred, we have rated every server in this fine establishment tonight. And I am pleased to announce that our winner, with a combined score of 37.5 out of 50, is the lovely Amara. He pointed at me. His friends cheered and clapped. Other customers turned to look. I felt the eyes of the entire restaurant burning into me. Amara, come up here and accept your crown, Chad bellowed. I didn't move. I couldn't move. My feet were cemented to the floor. Rick appeared at my side. For one hopeful second, I thought he was going to shut this down. Instead, he whispered in my ear, just play along. They'll leave a huge tip. Think about that. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw him clearly for the first time in 4 years. He wasn't my manager. He wasn't my protector. He was a coward who would sell his staff's dignity for a percentage of the check. No, I said. My voice was quiet but firm. I'm not playing along. I walked away. I went to the break room. I sat down and let my phone keep recording. Because the night wasn't over. Not even close. What I discovered in the following days changed everything. And if you think the bachelor party was bad, what came next will make your blood run cold. The next morning, I called a meeting with the other servers. Not officially. Rick didn't know. We gathered at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the restaurant. 7 of us crammed into a corner booth. Melissa was there, her eyes still red from crying the night before. Jenny sat with her arms crossed, anger radiating off her like heat. The others, Sarah, Marcus, Deshawn, and Kim, all listened as I told them what I had been doing. I've been recording, I said quietly. For 6 months. Every incident. Every time Rick dismissed us. Every time a customer crossed the line and nothing was done. The table went silent. Then Melissa leaned forward. You recorded last night? Every word, every rating, every time they touched us without permission. Jenny's jaw tightened. Rick told me to take it as a compliment when they gave me a 5.5. Said I should be grateful they noticed me at all. That's when the stories started pouring out. Marcus told us about a customer who had made racist comments about him for months, calling him the help, and snapping his fingers to get his attention. When he reported it to Rick, Rick said the customer was just from a different generation. Sarah described a regular who always requested her section, then spent the entire meal making comments about her body, asking if she had a boyfriend, telling her she'd be prettier if she smiled more. Rick's response? He tips 30%. Just deal with it. Deshawn, one of the bartenders, revealed that Rick had specifically told him to be extra friendly to female customers because it was good for business. He said my job was to flirt, like I'm some kind of escort. By the end of that conversation, I had something more valuable than my own recordings. I had witnesses, I had patterns, I had a system of abuse that stretched back years, enabled and protected by a manager who cared more about his bottom line than his employees' safety. And I was going to burn it all down. Over the next 3 months, I documented everything. Every shift, my phone recorded. I kept a written log in a notebook I hid in my car, a small leather-bound journal I bought specifically for this purpose. Date, time, incident, witnesses, exact words spoken, my emotional state, who else was present. I was meticulous. I was patient. I was methodical. I treated it like a second job because in many ways, it was. The job of building my case. The job of preparing for the day when the truth would finally see daylight. And most importantly, I was invisible. Rick had no idea what was coming. He probably thought I had forgotten about the bachelor party. He probably thought I had moved on, accepted my place, fallen back into line like I always did. He was wrong. On January 8th, I walked into the local EEOC office with a folder 3 inches thick. My hands trembled slightly as I handed it to the intake officer. Not from fear, from anticipation. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. Recordings, transcripts, witness statements, my incident log spanning 6 months, photographs of bruises from when customers grabbed too hard, screenshots of text conversations where coworkers described their own experiences. The intake officer, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes, gray-streaked hair, and a no-nonsense demeanor, flipped through the pages in silence. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, traffic hummed. Inside, my heart pounded. When she finished, she looked up at me. Ms. Davis, she said slowly. This is one of the most comprehensive harassment cases I've seen in 12 years. How long have you been collecting this? 6 months, I said. But the harassment has been going on for 4 years. She nodded, wrote something in her notes, and handed me a card. We're going to need all of this digitized, and I'm assigning an investigator immediately. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, EEOC investigators showed up at the Golden Oak during a lunch shift. I wasn't working that day. I heard about it from Melissa, who sent me a frantic text. Feds are here. Rick looks like he's about to pass out. Everyone's freaking out. I smiled for the first time in months. But that wasn't the only consequence, because while the EEOC was investigating the Golden Oak, I had hired a lawyer. Her name was Grace Chen, and she had spent 15 years specializing in workplace harassment cases. When I showed her my evidence, she didn't just see a complaint, she saw a lawsuit. The bachelor party alone is enough, she told me in her office, a sleek space overlooking the city. But combined with the pattern of enablement, the manager's recorded dismissals, the witness statements, Ms. Davis, we're not just going after the Golden Oak, we're going after their HET corporate ownership. This is systemic. Rick found out about the lawsuit on a Monday afternoon. He called me 17 times. I didn't answer. He sent texts that started pleading and ended threatening. You're going to ruin everything. No one will hire you after this. You're making a huge mistake. I screenshotted every single message. More evidence. The deposition phase was brutal but satisfying. Rick was questioned for 3 hours. I watched the transcript later, highlighted the parts where he contradicted himself. When asked about the bachelor party incident, he first claimed he didn't remember it. Then, when confronted with my recording, he admitted it happened, but insisted the servers didn't seem that bothered. When Grace played the audio of Melissa crying in the break room, his face went pale. I didn't know it was that serious, he stammered. You didn't ask, Grace replied. Chad Worthington and his bachelor party friends were subpoenaed as witnesses. Most of them hired lawyers immediately. Derek, the one with the slicked back hair who had grabbed my arm, tried to claim the whole thing was a joke taken out of context. When the judge heard the recording of him saying, "You're up to an 8 now, isn't that great?" she was not amused. The Golden Oaks corporate office tried to settle. They offered me $50,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. Grace brought me the offer with a look of mild disgust. They're trying to bury this, she said. What do you want to do? I thought about Melissa crying in the break room. I thought about Jenny being called old at 32. I thought about Marcus being treated like the help. I thought about every server who had ever been told to just deal with it. No NDA, I said. And we're not settling for 50. The trial lasted 8 days. 8 days of testimony, evidence, cross-examination. The prosecution laid out a pattern of harassment stretching back over a decade. Former employees came forward, people I had never met, telling stories that mirrored my own. One woman, a server from 6 years ago, broke down on the stand describing an incident where a customer followed her to her car after her shift. When she reported it to Rick, he told her she was probably being paranoid. The customer came back 2 weeks later. Rick seated him in her section. When it was my turn to testify, I was terrified. My palms were sweating. My mouth felt dry as sandpaper. I could feel every pair of eyes in that courtroom on me. The defendants glared. Their lawyers looked skeptical. The jury watched with careful, neutral expressions. But I had something those men didn't have. I had the truth. I had documentation. I had years of pain transformed into evidence. And I had a voice I was no longer willing to silence. I described the bachelor party in detail, the scorecards, the ratings, Chad standing on the booth declaring me the winner, Rick telling me to play along. The courtroom was silent. Even the Defendants' lawyers seemed uncomfortable. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Gray clouds hung low over the courthouse. Rain threatened but never fell. The jury filed in with somber faces. My lawyer squeezed my hand under the table. I held my breath. The foreperson stood. The Golden Oak's corporate ownership was found liable for creating and maintaining a hostile work environment. Rick was found personally liable for negligent supervision and retaliation. The bachelor party participants were named as co-defendants in the civil suit. When the total damages were announced, $473,000, split among the plaintiffs, I heard someone behind me gasp. I didn't gasp. I just closed my eyes and breathed. Finally. Finally. Policy changes were mandated: third-party harassment training, anonymous reporting systems, quarterly audits by an independent firm, real accountability. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory came 3 weeks later, when I drove past the Golden Oak and saw the for lease sign in the window. The corporate owners had decided to cut their losses. The restaurant that had built its reputation on luxury and "the customer is always right" was now an empty shell. Rick was named in a follow-up investigation by the state labor board. He lost his restaurant management license. Last I heard, he was working at a fast food chain on the outskirts of the city. The bachelor party boys didn't fare much better. Chad's engagement was called off when his fiancée found out what happened. Derek was fired from his job at an investment firm after the lawsuit made local news. His company had a zero-tolerance policy. Turns out they weren't interested in employing someone who rated women like livestock. 1 year later, I sat in the break room of my new restaurant. It's a small place, family-owned, tucked away on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The break room has a window that overlooks a small garden. There's a real couch, not a broken one. The coffee is freshly brewed, not left over from yesterday. And there's a manager named Helen who actually listens when her staff has concerns, who actually does something when problems arise, who treats us like people, not products. The pay is less. The tips are smaller. But when I walk onto that floor, I don't feel like prey. I feel like a person, a whole, respected, valued person. I was folding napkins when my phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Guess what? I just got accepted to nursing school. Couldn't have done it without you. You showed me I didn't have to stay silent. Thank you, Amara." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I smiled. A real smile. The kind I hadn't felt in years. Because here's what I learned in those 4 years at the Golden Oak. Something no one tells you when you start working in the service industry. Something I wish someone had told me on my very first day. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects them. The harassers. The enablers. The managers who look the other way because the customer is spending $2,000. The corporate executives who care more about profit margins than human dignity. They count on our silence. They weaponize our politeness. They turn our professionalism into a cage, our need for this job into chains. But documentation? Documentation is power. Every recording I made, every note I wrote, every witness statement I collected, those were bricks in a wall they couldn't knock down. And when the wall was high enough, it became a fortress of truth. I think about Chad sometimes, standing on that booth, drunk and proud, declaring me the winner of his little competition. He thought he was the one with power that night. He thought his money, his status, his gender gave him the right to reduce me to a number. But he was wrong. Because I wasn't playing his game. I was building my case. And when the judge read the verdict, when she announced that men would pay for what they had done, I finally understood something my mother told me when I was a little girl. She said, "Amara, the world will try to make you small. It will try to shrink you down until you fit into a box of someone else's making. But you get to decide how much space you take up. You get to decide when to speak and when to fight and when to walk away. Never let anyone else make that choice for you. I didn't let them. Not Rick. Not Chad. Not any of the men who thought I was just a number on a scorecard. I took up space. I raised my voice. I refused to shrink. And I made them listen. Every single one of them. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been told to just deal with it, if you've ever been rated, objectified, dismissed, I want you to know something. You don't have to smile through it. You don't have to be polite to people who treat you like property. You have options, you have rights, and you have more power than they want you to believe. Document everything, find your witnesses, build your case, tell your story, because they're counting on your silence. And your silence is the only thing standing between them and consequences. Mine didn't keep them safe. And now, neither will theirs. The Golden Oak Steakhouse is a parking lot now. They tore it down 6 months after the lawsuit. The corporate owners decided the brand was too damaged to salvage. The building that had stood for 30 years, that had served countless meals, that had witnessed countless moments of both joy and degradation, was reduced to rubble in 3 days. I drove by once, just to see, just to remember. The demolition crew had left nothing behind but concrete dust and memories. And standing there in my car, windows down, autumn wind carrying the smell of rain, looking at the empty space where my dignity was tested and my power was forged, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost you, even when everyone told you to let it go. I didn't let it go. I let it out. And that made all the difference. Rick works at a drive-thru now, a fast food place out by the highway where the customers order through a speaker and he never has to look anyone in the eye. I heard he still tells people the lawsuit was unfair, that he was just doing his job, that the whole thing was blown out of proportion by overly sensitive women. That's fine. Let him tell his story in the drive-thru. Let him justify himself to strangers ordering breakfast burritos. I've got recordings of the truth. The truth has a way of outlasting excuses. Chad's wedding was canceled. His fiancée, a woman named Sarah who I never met, but who reached out to me after the verdict, called off the engagement 3 weeks before the ceremony. She sent me a message on social media, a long one. She said, "I had no idea who he really was. I thought I knew him. I thought he was kind. But kindness doesn't hold up scorecards to rate women like objects. Kindness doesn't treat people like entertainment. Thank you for showing me the truth before I made the biggest mistake of my life." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. Some truths speak for themselves. Melissa is in nursing school now. Jenny left the restaurant industry entirely and became a paralegal. She said my case inspired her. Marcus is managing a restaurant of his own now, one where harassment is a fireable offense, no warnings, no second chances. He calls it his policy of real consequences. I like that. As for me, I still serve tables. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because I refuse to let what happened at the Golden Oak define my entire relationship with this industry. There are good restaurants out there, good managers, good customers, and I found one. But I kept the recordings, all of them, not as trophies, as reminders. Reminders of what I survived, what I fought, what I won. And if it ever happens again, if I ever find myself in another Golden Oak, another back booth with scorecards, another manager who tells me boys will be boys, I'll know exactly what to do. I won't cry in the break room. I won't go home and question myself. I won't wonder if I'm overreacting. I'll smile. I'll nod. I'll be professional. I'll be the perfect server they expect me to be. And I'll press record. Because they taught me something valuable in those 4 years. Something they never intended to teach. They taught me that in a world that wants to rate me, judge me, reduce me to a number between 1 and 10, the only scorecard that matters is the one I keep. The one with dates and times and names and evidence. The one that says I was here, this happened, and I didn't stay silent. My name is Amara Davis. I was a server at the Golden Oak Steakhouse for 4 years. A bachelor party rated me on a scale of 1 to 10. My manager looked me in the eyes and told me, boys will be boys. The judge disagreed, and so did I.